Hi, I'm Sally, here to talk about my experience hiking the longest marked trail in the Icelandic Highlands. So this is not actually one trail, it's three separate trails that are connected right together. I did them north to south, and the names of the trails in that direction are the Hellismannaleid. That was probably terribly mispronounced. And then the Laugavegur, which you may have heard of, very popular. And then finally, a trail that has two names. One is called the Skogar Trail, the other name is the Fimmvörduháls. So yes, three trails. I will describe them to you and talk about my experience and recommendations. So, the Hellismannaleid, this is where I started. And the important thing to know about this trail is that if you look it up in the Cicerone guidebook or maybe some other guidebooks, it will describe it as a 3-day trail that starts from a campsite called Rujipnalar. However, there's since been a 1-day extension added to this trail that the guidebooks don't seem to mention. It starts in a place called Laugavegur. I say place because it's not like a town or anything. It's just a driveway where there's a hotel called the Laugavegur Hotel. That is the official starting place. A lot of people won't even know that, so don't rely on the bus driver because it's not an official stop and they might not know what you're talking about. So you're going to need to have your map out so you can show you the bus driver. You might want to sit near the front so you can tap them on the shoulder once you're getting close, and hopefully they will be kind enough to let you off there, which they did. I stumbled off the bus with my pack all alone. No one else got off. A local farmer came out to comment on the fact that it was strange and funny that I had gotten off there alone. So yes, don't expect anyone to know what you're talking about. The trail was not hard to find with the GPS track that I had gotten from a blogger online. But there's no sign or anything, I don't think, so you're gonna have to rely on that GPS track. The trail was really well marked. There were a few sections later in the day that were very overgrown because there's not a lot of people on this trail, but there was a road running parallel, so I was able to just take the road, but generally not a problem navigating it. Some of it is on an old dirt road. It's very flat that day. It's quite long though. It is very monotonous. It's definitely the least dramatic part of this whole hike, and so I can see why it's not super popular, but it gave me a chance to enjoy like the smaller things, like the little tiny flowers growing out of the volcanic soil, things like that that you're not going to notice once you're faced with the really epic dramatic scenery that comes later on this trail. There's also a really good surprise near the end, which I won't spoil because the surprise was kind of what made it such a rewarding day for me. So at the end of that day, you're going to arrive in Rujipnalar, which is a campground. It has some cooking shelters. It's a really nice, quiet place to camp, actually. And it is an official stop on the hiker shuttle. So this is where most people would start this route. Now, the next 3 days are not going to be busy either. There was only 2 other solo hikers and nobody else hiking the route when I was there. The campsites, some of them were a lot busier, but yes, the trail itself, super quiet. It's become sort of more and more epic as you go, and by the last couple days are really pretty spectacular, and I would absolutely recommend adding this onto your Laugavegur experience if you have the time, especially if you want to enjoy a bit of a quieter part of the Highlands. So altogether, that trail is 4 days, 1 for the extension and 3 for this sort of main part of the trail. I felt very safe. There was no big hazards. There were some shallow streams I had to wade through, but nothing else. So I rolled into Laugavegur, where I met up with a friend who fortunately had brought a whole bunch of my food with her so that I didn't have to carry that the first 4 days of my adventure. There is also a general store that's like in an old bus there where you can replenish your provisions. but it is very expensive. But of course, if you're doing this whole trail without, having anybody bring you an aid package like I got, then you're gonna have to unfortunately rely on those places along the way where you can buy some overpriced, not very good dehydrated food that you're going to be very tired of by the end of your hike. So at Laugavegur, there's some hot springs. They're free. I recommend going in the morning before the tour buses get there. They're a lot quieter. We stayed at Laugavegur for 3 nights because there's some really great day hiking that takes you out into some regions that are not otherwise covered by the route that I did. So I would recommend staying there at least 2 nights, maybe 3 if you want to have an opportunity for a rest day, especially because that's where the hot springs are. So Laugavegur is a very bustling place, and it is the start of the Laugavegur, which is a very busy trail. If you're new to solo wilderness adventures, maybe you've done some backpacking with friends, but you're a bit nervous about going by yourself, this would be a great 4-day route to do because there's just lots of people everywhere. You're never gonna feel nervous. Of course, the downside is it's also very busy. The campsites are all great, just like they are on the Hellismannaleid. They have amenities, bathrooms. I think most of them had showers, kitchen sink area for doing your dishes, and water. There's a reason this route is so popular. It is really spectacular and epic, and logistically it's very easy to do just the 4 days of the Laugavegur because the shuttles come in the morning to Laugavegur and they leave I think around midday or something from the end of that trail, which is called Pórsmark. I'm not going to talk that much more about the Laugavegur because there's probably a million videos and blogs about that trail. If you only have 4 or 5 days to spend in the Highlands, then that's probably what you want to do because it is spectacular and the logistics are simple. So I stayed 2 nights at Pórsmark, which is where I said goodbye to my friend who got back onto the hiker shuttle. I did a day hike. It wasn't particularly remarkable because it kind of was repetitive. It was the same scenery that I had already seen and was going to see again the next day. But it is a nice place for a bit of a rest day because it's a relatively nice campground where you can set up your tent maybe a little bit further away from other people. Some of the campgrounds are just a big open field where people seem to want to camp really cheek to jowl with one another. So from Pórsmark, the 3rd trail begins, and it is called either the Skógar trail or the Fimmvörduháls. It is really, really spectacular. I guess it's hard to compare them all because the landscape is just so surreal and diverse along all of them, but that Fimmvörduháls trail is you should definitely try to do it if you have the time. You can do it all in a single day, a long day. And the daylight hours are very long in the summer, so it's 100% possible from that perspective. And you basically go really far up and then you just kind of trot your way down the mountain in the afternoon. So I found it was pretty doable in a day. I had intended to do it over 2 days, but unfortunately I made my hut booking for the wrong year. You do have to stay in a hut at least up until 2023. You are not allowed to camp up there, so if you do want to spread it over 2 days, then you need to make a reservation in one of the 2 huts up there. So the very, very end of this whole experience is at Skógar, which is a very famous waterfall, and unfortunately it's right along the main sort of tourist route, so it's very busy. The campsite down there is not nice. It's right adjacent to a very busy, dusty parking lot. And I do not recommend staying here any longer than you have to, but unfortunately the timing of the shuttle bus is not very good. It comes, I believe, in the morning, which is not ideal if you've been hiking down. So something you could consider is to stay at one of the huts and then get up really early so that you have lots of time to enjoy the really beautiful scenic walk down past all of the amazing waterfalls near the bottom. There is actually a bus later in the day. It's a public bus, but people were a little bit worried about whether it would show up. It was hard to get certainty on whether it would be, there, whether there would be a seat available on it. I did take it and it was fine. It was quite busy though, so if you're more risk adverse to those kinds of logistical things, then I would plan on taking the hiker shuttle instead. So if you have only 4 or 5 days in the Highlands, I would recommend doing the Laugavegur with an extra day if you have it in Laugavegur for a day hike. If you have an extra day on top of that, I would add the Fimmvörduháls or Skogar Trail. Despite the logistical headaches, it is worth it. It's amazing. And if you have a few extra days, then I would add the Hellismannaleid and the Fimmvorduhals. Especially if you're looking to get a bit of solitude, then the Hellismannaleid is a very good candidate, but maybe not quite as epically scenic as the Fimmvorduhals. If you have lots of time like me, then I would totally recommend doing the whole thing. Doing that first day, even though it's kind of monotonous, it felt like a real adventure being out there completely alone in these volcanic landscapes that were really foreign to me. And there is a really great surprise near the end, like I mentioned, so that made the day very rewarding. So I chose this trail over other regions of Iceland because my research suggested that the Highlands are by far the most scenic part of Iceland. And I can tell you now that they are indeed very scenic. The scenery is incredible. It's like something out of Dune or like a fever dream. You won't even believe what you're seeing. And the variety of landscapes, like it's constantly shifting from one surreal thing to another. It's hard to even articulate how strange this is. Like you won't believe it until you see it for yourself. So super recommend hiking in Iceland. I've hiked in quite a few countries in different regions, and it's totally unlike anything I've pretty much ever seen before. Yeah, just go and see for yourself. If you stay at the hostel in Reykjavik, the big one outside of the main city, the shuttle leaves straight from there. I would recommend staying indoors there. It's not that much more expensive than camping, and if it's pouring rain out, you're going to be very glad that your gear is not soaked before you even start this trail. And it also means you get to use the nice indoor kitchens. I would definitely recommend going north to south like I did, because you start with this sort of least epic landscape and you work your way up to the most epic. That's definitely the way to go. You can buy fuel in Reykjavik. You can also find lots of free half-used fuel canisters in the cooking shelters at Laugavegur and at Porsmark. Hot tip. In terms of gear recommendations, I would bring earplugs because people seem weirdly fond of setting up their tent like right next to other people's tents. And in some cases that's actually unavoidable because it's very busy. Maybe bring some rubber flip-flops for going over to the hot springs and for using the showers. Maybe consider bringing a power bank because you're going to be taking a lot of photos and there's nowhere to plug in your phone along the way. Definitely a hat, sunglasses, and some sunscreen because it's easy to forget that the sun is high in the sky and there are a lot of hours of daylight, so you're just going to be getting way more sun exposure than you might feel like you are getting along this trail. Warm clothes and rain gear because it can be blowy and wet out there. Other than that, just bring all the normal things you would normally bring on a wilderness backpacking adventure. So that's it. I hope that's helpful because there's not a whole lot of information on that first section of the hike. Do have a look at the blogs that are out there and find that GPS track that I did. And maybe once you're done, make a video or a blog post yourself so you can share the information about that part of the hike. That's it. Thanks for watching. Maybe think about subscribing to hear more about some long distance hiking adventures and other travel tips. Bye now.